The first time I heard her words, they cut through the sterile hush of the NICU like a jagged shard of glass. My daughter, little Evangeline, lay in a row of incubators under a canopy of monitors and warming lights. Her chest rose and fell with measured beeps, each sound a promise of fragile life suspended between heartbeats. And my mother, my own mother, the woman who gave me life, stood at the glass partition, her face pale and pinched, her arms folded defensively across her chest. "She's such a burden," she said, voice low enough that I thought perhaps the machines had swallowed her words. But the young nurse by my side caught the tremor in her voice and glanced at me with sympathy in her eyes. "Why can't she just—" I was standing there, physically present but mentally shattered, my heart lodged in my throat at her cruelty. Why had I ever hoped she'd be here to share this moment, this test of life and faith? Instead, she judged. She condemned. She whispered that her own granddaughter was unwanted. They let me into the tiny examination room closer to her crib, and I paced like a caged animal while a doctor explained white blood cell counts and ventilator settings. Terms I had memorized over the last 2 days felt alien now. Sepsis, intubation, pulmonary hypertension. Every pronouncement threatened to tip me toward panic, but my daughter's tiny hand, wrapped in a gauze glove, clasped a single finger of mine. That frail connection anchored me to a reality that mattered. This child, my child, needed me. I remembered the moment in my mother's living room, just weeks before Evangeline was born, when I told her we were expecting a baby. I had been overjoyed, my face glowing like sunrise. She had pressed her lips into a tight line, reached over to pat my arm, and whispered, "I hope you're ready for the sacrifices you'll make. Some things are too heavy for good people." I smiled nervously, assuming it was her own brand of humor, her way of testing me, of making sure I understood the gravity of motherhood. Now I understood. She had seen my strength and questioned whether it was enough. She had seen how life's challenges shaped me, how I refused to bend under pressure, and wondered if this tiny girl, so vulnerable and dependent, would break me in ways I could not yet fathom. But I wouldn't let her defeat me with a single cruel remark. I would prove that Evangeline deserved every breath she drew, every drop of care we could muster. "Mom," I whispered, the syllable thick with grief and anger. But her back was turned, her shoulders rigid with disdain. She was already walking away, her designer heels clicking on the tile, an aria of abandonment. They told me she had to go. Visiting hours were over. I watched her retreat down the corridor, and the doors swung shut, separating us with a finality I still taste in my sleep. I sat by Evangeline's side for the rest of the day, stroking her back, humming a lullaby I barely remembered. Each note was a promise. I would stand guard over her life. I would fight for her every moment. Night fell in the NICU, and the fluorescent lights dimmed to a soft glow. I dozed in a recliner beside her incubator, my head resting on my folded arms. I dreamed of her quiet laughter and her tiny footsteps racing across the backyard. I saw her face, radiant and healthy, calling out for me. And then I heard that voice again. Not my mother's this time, but the nurse's gentle whisper as she adjusted Evangeline's IV. "She's doing so well," she said. "Look at that color. She's a fighter, just like you." I closed my eyes and let tears slip free. I was no longer afraid. In that moment, I realized that love isn't measured by how many words you speak. It's baked into every sacrifice, every bedside vigil, every breath you take for another soul. The next morning I called my mother. My hands trembled, but my voice remained steady. "Mom, you said she was a burden. I want you to come see her." Her long silence rattled me. Then she sighed, a sound heavy with regret. I'll think about it," she said. I didn't accept her half-hearted promise. Instead, I whispered, "I'll be right here, waiting," and I hung up. The sun was rising over the hospital as I stepped outside into the crisp morning air. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, but also a flicker of something new. Hope. Because if I could hold on to hope through the darkest night, then nothing could break me, especially not a single cruel word. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. The dawn light filtered through the vertical blinds, painting the NICU in sharp stripes of gold and gray. I crossed to Evangeline's incubator with deliberate steps, each one echoing the silent prayer in my chest. Last night's vigil had worn me thin, but I had slept with purpose, as though in dreams I could gather strength for the battles of today. Her tiny chest rose and fell with more confidence than yesterday. The monitors held steady, the alarms silent. A nurse hovered nearby, clipboard in hand, her face a calm blend of relief and professional concern. "Good morning," she whispered as I approached. "She's stable. We're lowering her ventilator support this afternoon." "Really?" I asked, voice thick. My heart fluttered like a captive bird. "That soon?" "It's promising," the nurse said, tapping the chart. "Her oxygen saturation levels are solid." I felt a surge of gratitude. Elena, the nurse, had become my ally in this sterile world of machines and protocols. She saw me not just as another anxious parent, but as a mother who refused to surrender. Suddenly my phone buzzed, my mother's name flashing on the screen. My breath caught. I pressed ignore. Today was not the day for half promises. Today I needed action, not hesitation. The afternoon sun climbed high by the time I returned after lunch. I found Evangeline's incubator empty. My pulse spiked until I saw Elena, her gentle smile softened by exhaustion. "She's in her bassinet," Elena said, guiding me across the ward. "On a low-flow oxygen setup." I followed, caught between hope and terror. My daughter lay small and golden in a transparent cradle, her tiny nostrils flaring with each breath. She looked so peaceful, as though the world outside might as well not exist. "You did it," Elena murmured. "She made it this far because of you." I nodded, pressing my cheek against the glass. "She's my heart." At that moment, the glass partition slid open. My mother stepped through, her face drained of color, her eyes rimmed with red. She wore a simple blouse and jeans. No designer labels here, only a mother's fear. "May I?" she asked, voice low. I stepped aside. She moved closer, her movements tentative, as though approaching a wild animal. For a long moment, she simply looked, as though reacquainting herself with a stranger. Then she reached out, fingertips brushing Evangeline's blanket. "She's beautiful," my mother said. I'm sorry." Pain and relief warred in my chest. "Stand here," I said quietly, motioning to a chair. She sank into it, shoulders trembling. "I was scared," she admitted. "When you called, I thought I didn't know how to help, and I heard." Her voice broke. I closed my eyes, the jagged edges of her words from yesterday still cutting deep. "I called her a burden," she whispered, eyes flooding with tears. I didn't mean it. I saw you, my daughter, trying to protect her, and I forgot what it was like to be you. I forgot how strong you are." "It hurt," I said quietly. "It still hurts." She nodded, hands twisting in her lap. "I know. I'm so sorry." Silence settled between us, heavy with regret and possibility. Then I said, "Stay." The word passed from my lips like a lifeline. "Stay with me. Show me what I'm missing." A small step, but a beginning. Over the next hour, we sat side by side, watching Evangeline. My mother told me about the friends she had called, the family who rallied to pray and hope. She spoke of regrets, of moments she'd awakened in the night with nightmares of losing us both. I listened. I let her speak. And I realized that forgiveness isn't a gift, it's a choice. As the last sliver of daylight slipped away, the nurse returned. "She's ready for her bath," Elena said. My mother looked at me, uncertain. I nodded. "Go on." Together we washed Evangeline's tiny body, her skin warm beneath our fingertips. My mother hummed a lullaby, an old hymn from my childhood that I had nearly forgotten. The melody soared in the quiet room, filling cracks in my heart I hadn't known were there. When the bath was over, I swaddled Evangeline in a soft blanket. She cooed, blinking up at us with big, curious eyes. My mother smiled through tears. "She's a fighter," she said. "Yes," I said, "and we'll fight for her, together." The machines hummed around us, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Later that night, as I settled into my recliner once more, I heard the rhythm of her breathing slow. I closed my eyes, the room bathed in soft glow. Tomorrow they'll start feeding her through a tube. And I'll be here, ready. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the blinds in golden streaks that glinted across the quilted blanket swaddling my daughter. Evangeline lay peacefully, her eyelids fluttering like the wings of a butterfly. I hovered close, my hand resting lightly on her chest to feel the reassuring rise and fall of those tiny lungs. The rhythmic hum of the ventilator was gone now, replaced by the soft hiss of supplemental oxygen. Progress. A nurse wheeled in a tray, stacked with syringes and feeding tubes. My heart pounded as I recognized the equipment for gavage feeding. An intrusive but necessary step to help Evangeline transition from parenteral nutrition to her own digestive capacity. This was a milestone, and I felt a swirl of pride and anxiety. Elena was there, already prepping the tubing. She looked up and smiled, her eyes bright despite her fatigue. "You ready?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Do I have a choice?" She chuckled, then turned to my daughter. "Let's give her a taste, shall we?" The nurse guided me through the process. Flush the line, measure the formula, attach the syringe, raise it slightly to let gravity do its work. Evangeline fussed. A tiny cry stirred in her throat, but she didn't pull away. I stroked her forehead, whispering encouragement. A few drops of liquid entered her mouth, and I held my breath. She paused, then swallowed. My relief was so visceral it almost took my breath away. Over the next hour, we repeated the feeding in measured increments, watching Evangeline grow stronger with each dose. By midday, the day shift doctor arrived to assess her. He nodded approvingly. "Her weight gain is on track. Soon we'll trial her on direct breast or bottle feeding." I glanced at my mother, who stood quietly in the corner, arms folded as she did when overwhelmed. I walked over and slipped an arm through hers. "Thank you for being here." Her grip tightened around my hand. "I'm learning." The afternoon passed in a blur of procedures, blood draws, developmental assessments, respiratory therapy. I remained at Evangeline's side, absorbing every detail. Each chart entry, each consultation, felt like a piece of a map guiding us toward home. As evening settled, I finally dared to leave the ward for a hot meal and a brief solace. The cafeteria was nearly empty. I sat at a corner table, the tray before me untouched. My mind replayed the day's highs and lows until a text message snapped me back. "Need to talk. Call me now." My heart sank. The message was from Jake, my estranged brother, who distanced himself since the baby's complications began. We hadn't spoken in weeks. I dialed his number. His voice was curt. "I heard about the feeding. That's good news." "Yeah, she's doing better." "Listen, I can't help but feel I messed up. I didn't visit. I was scared to see you like this, but I want to help." His admission cracked something open inside me. I exhaled. "If you mean it, come tomorrow. I need an extra hand." Quote. He hesitated, then agreed. "Be there." When I returned to the NICU, the lights were dimmed for the night. Evangeline slept peacefully, the gentle rise of her chest a lullaby. I settled into the recliner and let exhaustion wash over me. Deep in sleep, I dreamt of sunlight dancing on my daughter's laugh, of a life beyond machines and hospitals. And then I heard footsteps, 2 sets, one familiar, one tentative. I opened my eyes to see Jake and my mother standing side by side at the incubator, faces softened by shared concern. Jake reached through the opening and touched his niece's hand. My mother moved closer, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead when I stirred. I realized then that healing wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up. In the stillness, the 3 of us formed a fragile circle around Evangeline's crib. I felt gratitude deepen in my chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Feeding trials, therapies, the uncertainty of progress, but we would face it together. And yet, I couldn't shake the unease that had crept into my bones. Because as we bonded beside her crib, I noticed something on her monitor, a pattern in the heart rate that stuttered unexpectedly. I froze, eyes darting to the nurse station. Elena was out of view. The monitor beeped once, twice, then resumed its steady rhythm. Just a momentary glitch, or something more? Before I could decide, the alarm shrilled to life, its shriek echoing through the ward and ripping open the calm we'd just woven. I bolted upright, adrenaline surging. My mother and Jake gasped in unison, their hands reaching for mine. The monitor's readout flashed crimson warnings. And in that moment I realized, nothing here is guaranteed, not even the next heartbeat. Adrenaline crashed through me as the alarm's shrill cry reverberated off the pale walls. I lunged to Evangeline's side, heart pounding in my ears like a drumbeat. My mother and Jake mirrored my movement, their faces shadowed with panic. At the monitor, Elena appeared in an instant, her steps sleek and practiced. She pressed a silence button, the shriek muting into a high-pitched hum. I watched as she scanned the screen, brow furrowing. "Respiratory distress," she said softly but urgently. "It looks like her airway is constricting." I knelt, pressing my ear to the clear acrylic hood. Evangeline's breaths were shallow, rapid, like a fluttering bird. My worst fears ignited. After all the progress, we could lose this moment. "Call the respiratory therapist," I cried, voice husky. My mother and brother stood back, their questions stranded on their lips. I didn't want anyone else interfering. I needed control, needed to know each step for my daughter. Elena gave me a look that mixed apology and respect. She pulled out a stethoscope and listened to Evangeline's chest. "She's got some wheezing. We need to intubate again and administer nebulized epinephrine." Fear twisted in my gut. The thought of that plastic tube snaking down my daughter's throat made my blood run cold. But I did not hesitate. "Do what you must," I said, voice breaking. In minutes, a respiratory therapist arrived, trolleys loaded with supplies. They whisked Evangeline onto a procedure table. A doctor appeared at my side. "We need to reintubate," he said, eyes locking with mine. "Is that okay?" Tears pricked my eyes, but I held my ground. "Yes." They swaddled her and placed a soft sedation mask over her face. I closed my eyes as she slipped into a twilight sleep. My mother gripped my hand. "This is for the best," she whispered. I could only nod. When I dared to look again, the team had positioned a pediatric laryngoscope. A suction catheter cleared secretions, and then the endotracheal tube was passed. I watched the doctor's gloved hands move with precise determination. My breaths came in shallow gasps. "Ventilator back on," the therapist called out. The bag at the side compressed and released. A mechanical mimicry of breath. Evangeline's chest rose and fell once, twice. And then the monitors confirmed stable readings. Oxygen saturation climbed back into normal range. A collective exhale filled the room. I slumped to the floor, tears finally breaking free. Elena knelt beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "She's okay." I clung to the words as though they were a lifeline. That evening, after the flurry of activity subsided, I found myself in a small room for family consultations. My mother and Jake flanked me on the couch, concern etched into their features. A neonatologist entered, closing the door behind him. His white coat was wrinkled and his expression solemn. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said gently. "We believe the cause is bronchial spasm. It can happen as her lungs develop. We're adjusting her medications to include a low-dose bronchodilator. We'll monitor her closely overnight." I nodded, clutching my mother's hand. "Thank you." He gave me a small, encouraging smile. "You're doing everything right. She's lucky to have you." His words resonated deep inside me, but I knew this wasn't over. Each milestone carried hidden dangers. I resolved that I would not rest until Evangeline was safe. My mother watched me with newfound respect. "You're the strongest person I know." I squeezed her hand. "No, I've learned from you. But her strength comes from us all." Together, we returned to the NICU, where my daughter lay resting under her new treatment. The bronchodilator mask covered her nose and mouth as gentle mist coaxed open her airways. I sat beside her, brushing a tendril of hair from her forehead. My thoughts drifted to the moment I first held her, to the day we braved gavage feedings, to the trials we'd already endured. Each memory was a badge of survival. Night deepened, and the ward's lull settled in, punctuated only by the hum of machines. My mother leaned over and whispered, "Rest, dear. I'll watch her for a bit." I shivered, and she draped her jacket over me. Date with sleep, she teased, though her eyes glistened. I lay down, exhaustion overtaking me, but just as I drifted, a thought flickered. Tomorrow, the bronchodilator dose might need adjustment. The uncertainty never ceased. In sleep, I dreamed of Evangeline laughing in the sunshine, of rocking her to sleep in our own nursery, of the day this story would end and another would begin, one of health and joy. But for now, we stood at the threshold. Morning light filtered through the blinds once more, warming the NICU with a gentle promise of renewal. I sat beside Evangeline's crib, fingertips tracing the rounded edges of her tiny hand as she slept beneath a soft swaddle. The night had passed without major incident. The bronchodilator had done its work, coaxing steady breaths from her lungs. Relief washed over me, followed closely by resolve. Today, we would take another step toward bringing her home. Elena arrived before the sun had fully risen, her face bright despite the long hours she had logged. "Good morning, superstar," she whispered, checking the monitors. "Ready for your first oral feeding trial?" My heart fluttered. The moment had come. The transition from tube to breast or bottle. I inhaled sharply, tightening my grip on my daughter's hand. I think she is. We opted for the bottle first, to measure intake precisely. Elena swaddled Evangeline partially upright, propping her with soft-rolled blankets. I held the bottle gently, its teat just the size of her delicate lips. She blinked, studied the bottle, then latched on instinctively, surprising us both. For a moment, time slowed. Her soft suckling, the gentle hiss of formula flowing, the silent exultation in my chest. But then, halfway through the feed, her breathing stuttered, thin and rapid as before. "Stop," Elena instructed, removing the bottle. Evangeline's eyelids fluttered as her breathing became shallower. Panic roared in my throat. "What's happening?" Elena placed a hand on my arm. "She's aspirating a bit. Food going into her airway. We need to pause and let her clear her lungs." A respiratory therapist appeared, suction catheter in hand. They cleared her airway and administered a gentle pulse of oxygen. My mother and Jake, summoned by our earlier alarm, hovered in the doorway. "Is she okay?" my mother asked, voice trembling. Elena nodded. "Yes, but these trials can be tricky. Her coordination between suck, swallow, breathe is still developing. We'll try again later, with smaller amounts and more pacing." I exhaled, tears pooling. She's trying. The day unfolded in feeding attempts, therapy sessions, and chart reviews. Each step forward felt hard-won. My mother joined me for midday feeding, and together we encouraged Evangeline's small triumphs. A few sips here, a lullaby-sweetened swallow there. In the late afternoon, the doctor arrived with news. If she tolerated 2 more successful feeds, they'd consider safe discharge protocols, announcing our goal of a weekend homecoming. Joy and fear warred in my chest at the prospect, leaving the safety of constant monitoring for the uncertainty of life beyond the NICU. That evening, as I prepared for another feeding trial, I sent a text to my closest friends. "Possible home test tomorrow, pray for full feed." The replies poured in, love and hope spanning the digital distance. Night descended and the ward's lights dimmed again. My mother took her vigil shift, and I slipped out for a quick rest. In the staff break room, I closed my eyes on a vinyl chair, dreams of my daughter's first bath at home swirling in my mind. I woke to a jolt, my phone lighting up with a message. "Tomorrow at 1100, home evaluation team arrives." My pulse soared. I returned to the NICU to find my daughter peacefully sleeping, unaware that her world was about to expand beyond these walls. I sat beside her, brushing her cheek. "We're almost there, baby girl. Almost there." Quote. Suddenly, the monitor's heart rate trace dipped. A single flat line, my breath caught. An alarm began its urgent wail. My heart froze. This time, I wouldn't hesitate. The alarm's shriek jolted me from a daze, and I sprinted back to Evangeline's side. My heart thundered as the monitor's flat line sent a chill through the ward. Elena and the respiratory therapist were already there, masks and gloves in place, hands moving with practiced precision. "Resuscitation," Elena called out, her voice firm. They bagged her lungs, compressing and releasing with measured speed. I dropped to my knees, pressing my palms together in silent supplication. My mother and Jake crowded around, fear etched into every line of their faces. I tried to focus on Evangeline's flicker of life, her chest rising, falling, each gasp a triumph. After what felt like an eternity, the beeps resumed, weak but steady. Elena exhaled, lowering her mask. "She's back," she said softly. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed a hand to the glass. "Don't scare me like that again." She offered a small, sympathetic smile. "Let's keep monitoring closely." As the ward settled into a tense quiet, the neonatologist arrived. He reviewed the charts, murmuring about possible reflux causing the apnea and flatline. They adjusted her medications and positioned her with more elevation to prevent stomach contents from irritating her airway. I stayed by Evangeline's side, unwavering. Each time the monitor beeped, my breath caught, a vow to protect her, renewed with every pulse. Later, drained but determined, I sat in the consultation room with my mother and Jake. The doctor laid out the home evaluation checklist: nurse visit schedule, oxygen tank setup, feeding supplies, emergency plan. The logistics were daunting, but possible. Jake cleared his throat. "I can handle the supply runs and setup," he said. "I've got a truck." Relief flooded me. "Thank you." My mother reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'll stay until she's settled." We spent the next hours touring the discharge planning offices, signing forms, arranging home visits. Each signature felt like a step closer to freedom. That night, I stood once more by Evangeline's incubator. She slept under the new regimen, her breathing steady. I whispered into the hush, "Tomorrow, you come home." In my dreams, I saw her nursery, pastel walls, a mobile of stars, my arms cradling her softly. I felt the warmth of the living room, the smell of home-cooked meals, the laughter of family gathered around. But as dawn approached, doubt crept in. Would the home oxygen tank be reliable? Could I handle full-time care outside the hospital? Would Evangeline's condition remain stable? Morning came, crisp and bright. Elena visited, checking the monitor and giving a thumbs up for transport readiness. My pack sat by the crib: blankets, bottles, medication syringes. By mid-morning, the home evaluation nurse arrived with her bag and clipboard. She inspected the room we'd set up downstairs: the oxygen outlet, the suction machine, the baby monitor linked to 24/7 support. "You're prepared," she said, beaming. "Your plan is solid." Relief and fear warred within me. I closed my eyes, inhaling the antiseptic air, picturing fresh air instead. The transport team wheeled Evangeline out in her incubator, heart monitors beeping along. I followed, cradling her in my arms once she was secured in the car seat. "Safe travels," Elena said, pressing a gentle kiss to Evangeline's forehead. I buckled us in and turned the key. The engine's hum was a lullaby. As we pulled away from the hospital, the skyline receded and the doors closed behind us. My mother drove. Jake rode shotgun, maps and instructions in hand. When we turned onto our street, the house came into view: white picket fence, blooming hydrangeas. A welcome home banner hung awkwardly between two posts, courtesy of my brother. I unbuckled Evangeline, cradling her in my arms. The front door opened to sunlight and the scent of vanilla from the scented candle on the console table. My mother kissed her temple. "Welcome home, little fighter." Inside, I settled Evangeline in her rocker. She blinked sleepily at the mobile of stars spinning above her. I sank to the couch, tears of exhaustion and joy slipping free. My mother curled around me, Jake leaning against the doorframe. "Home," I whispered. But as Evangeline let out a soft whimper, I realized the real journey had only just begun. The cough came again, soft, urgent, echoing in the stillness of her nursery. My chest constricted, as though the air itself had turned to lead. I bolted from the rocker, adrenaline flooding every nerve. Moonlight glinted on the walls, casting silver streaks across the pastel mobile above Evangeline's crib. The room smelled of lavender and baby powder, incongruous comforts in the face of crisis. My gloved hand trembled as I reached for the monitor controls, but the cough came again, sharper this time, a plaintive plea. "Elena!" I hissed, eyes darting to the camera feed. She wasn't here. Home nurse Ella had left hours ago. It was just me. I slammed the monitor's silence cover, but the cough pulsed insistently through the speaker. My breath caught. Was it on the wrong oxygen setting? Had the secretions built up? I swallowed hard, scanning every readout. Oxygen saturation, heart rate, respiration count. Everything looked normal on the graph, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I yanked open the crib door and leaned over the mattress. Evangeline's tiny chest heaved with effort. Her eyelids fluttered, the soft pink of her cheeks tinged a dull gray in the pale light. Panic rose in my throat. My mother stirred in her slumber chair, blinking blearily as I shook her shoulder. "Mom, she's coughing. She's struggling to breathe." Her eyes snapped open, wide with fear. "Jesus," she whispered, springing to her feet. "Grab the mask!" Jake was nowhere in sight. He must have gone to the kitchen to fetch water. I grabbed the pocket-sized ambu bag and mask from the shelf, fumbling with the straps. My mother hovered, voice hushed but urgent. "Hold her head steady." Evie's cough clipped through the room again, each spasmodic breath sounding like a glass breaking. I braced one hand on her forehead and gently lifted her chin with the other, searching for the best angle. My mother slipped the mask over Evangeline's nose and mouth. I compressed the bag. Not enough. My arms shook. Was the tank empty already? No. The gauge showed half full. "Elena," I whimpered, though I knew she was miles away at the hospital. If only she could see how fragile we were here. My mother nodded at me to increase the pressure. I squeezed harder, rhythm merging with my pounding pulse. Evangeline's chest rose, a quiver that felt like a triumph and a torment at once. Then, suddenly, her small hand shot out, fingers flailing, knocking the mask askew. She pulled away, coughing fiercely, a wet rattle at the back of her throat. My heart lurched, and I nearly dropped the device. I pried the mask back into place, the fogging glass hiding her wide, frightened eyes. I continued to bag, counting in my head, 1, 2, 3, until the coughing subsided, and she lay limp under the mask's haze. I held my breath and froze. The respiration slowed. Shallow, but there. I dared to add a drop of pressure, watching her chest settle into a steady, albeit faint rise and fall. I ripped the mask away, gasping for air myself. Evangeline lay on her side, one arm draped across her face, each breath a muted victory. I swept her hair back, tears hot enough to sting. My mother knelt beside me, her trembling hand on mine. "Call 911?" I whispered hoarsely. She pulled my phone from her pocket and dialed as though moving in slow motion. I stroked Evangeline's back, murmuring soft encouragements. The phone crackled with static. The operator's voice instructed calm. We waited, each ring of the phone echoing like a funeral toll. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees, the night indifferent to our terror. My mother's voice wavered as she spoke to the operator. "Yes. Oxygen mask. Yes. No response. Please hurry." I closed my eyes, leaning into the rhythm of Evangeline's breathing, listening for that promise of life in each faint rise. And then, the monitor shrieked to life, the alarm's red light flashing, a brutal reminder that time was merciless. I opened my eyes to the glow of the screen, oxygen saturation plummeting below 40%, a number I barely understood, but which felt like a death knell in those moments. I scooped Evangeline into my arms, the mattress and monitors forgotten, and bolted from the room toward the front door, my mother on my heels, phone clamped to her ear. "Mom," I gasped between sobs, "we need to go, now!" In the foyer, the door burst open to the cool night air. I fumbled with the baby seat, eventually freeing Evangeline from the ambu bag straps. The black leather of the car seat contrasted with her pale, feeble form. My mother heaved the vehicle keys at me. I caught them, fumbling in my pocket, before yanking open the door and collapsing into the driver's seat. Evangeline held close across my lap because the car seat's harness would take too long. I slammed the door shut, engine roaring to life. My mother slid in beside me. 911, said paramedics are 5 minutes out, she panted. I pressed the accelerator, wheels spinning on the gravel driveway. 5 minutes is too long! My mother reached for the door handle as we swerved onto the street. Pray, she gasped. Pray she holds on. I jabbed the steering wheel. I can't lose her. The headlights carved a path through the darkness. Blue and red lights flickered in the distance, paramedics racing to meet us halfway. In the blur of emergency vehicles, my chest tightened. Each beat underscored the fragility of our choices, the razor's edge between hope and despair. I held Evangeline to my heart, whispering her name as the paramedics intercepted us, pulling her gently from my arms. And then they were gone, swallowed by the night, their sirens fading as I remained behind, hands clenched on the steering wheel, the road stretching out before me. Would she breathe again? My eyes snapped open at the faint cough echoing through the nursery speakers. I bolted upright in the rocker, my heart hammering as the dust motes of moonlight danced across the walls. How long had she been coughing? Before I could steady my breath, the monitor flashed. Paramedics burst through the front door, sirens swallowing the night's hush. They wheeled Evangeline onto a gurney lined with crisp white linens, her tiny form cocooned in blankets. I sprinted beside them, heart hammered against my ribs, every breath a struggle. Inside the ambulance, the fluorescent lights dazzled, a harsh glare on the urgency etched in every medic's expression. One raised the mask over Evangeline's face, administering oxygen, while another readied an IV line. I hovered at the edge, voice trembling. Her SATs are at 55%, the paramedic reported, fingers flying over the monitor. I clenched the rails of the gurney. Do what you have to. They nodded, and I watched as they worked with swift precision, drawing blood, securing the line, pressing a stethoscope to her chest. The engine growled beneath us as we lurched toward the hospital. My mother and Jake followed in our car, blue lights illuminating our rearview mirror. In the back of the ambulance, I squeezed Evangeline's hand, the IV line a cold thread against her tender skin. The paramedic glanced at me. Stay strong, Mom. We're getting her through this. I nodded, tears slipping. Please, just keep her breathing. They intubated again, the laryngoscope's glow reflecting in my wide eyes, and as the tube was inserted, I prayed it would be the last time. We arrived at the ER entrance where gurneys waited like silent sentinels. They raced her inside, sliding her through automatic doors into sterile corridors. I burst through behind them, the cold air of the hospital rushing in. Doctors and nurses formed a chain, passing Evangeline down the line. I followed until they ushered me into a small observation room. My mother collapsed into a chair. She's so small, she whispered, voice cracking. I paced, mind replaying every moment, from her first breath at home to this fight for life in the hospital's glare. After what felt like hours, a pediatric intensivist entered. His face was calm but grave. She's responding to treatment, he said, pulling up a chair. Her oxygenation improved once we cleared the secretions and stabilized ventilation. We're moving her to the PICU. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Can I see her? He nodded. A moment, then we'll give you updates as we adjust her settings overnight. I followed him through double doors into a fluorescent-lit room filled with monitors and the soft hiss of vents. There she lay, encased in protective equipment, wires spiraling around her like lifelines. I pressed my forehead against the glass, heart aching with relief and dread entwined. Her eyes fluttered open, as though asking if I was still there. I brushed a kiss across the glass. I'm here, baby girl. He adjusted her settings. She's stable, but this will be a long night of observation. I walked back to the waiting area where my mother and Jake sat in silence. She's in the PICU, I announced. They exhaled in unison. My mother reached for my hand. At dawn, I returned to Evangeline's side, weary but determined. The monitors beeped in time with her weakened pulses. A nurse slipped in, tapping her clipboard. She needs to rest. You should sleep too. I nodded, sliding into the recliner as the haze of exhaustion claimed me. In sleep, I dreamed of sunlight streaming through our nursery windows, of family laughter, of a future where Evangeline's cough was only a memory. But the monitors never turned off the night's questions. They whispered that every breath could be a battle, every cry a summons to guard her life. The early morning light in the PICU was brittle and gray through tall windows, illuminating the rows of incubators like a gallery of fragile sculptures. I perched on the edge of a vinyl recliner, my body stiff from hours at Evangeline's side. The soft shriek of monitors and the hiss of ventilators composed a mechanical symphony that had become the rhythm of my days and nights. Evangeline lay nestled under a transparent dome, her chest rising in hesitant waves. The endotracheal tube was still in place, and gentle vibrations from her ventilator echoed against the chamber. Her tiny hand, encircled by a pulse oximeter, glowed intermittently with reassuring bleeps of life. I reached inside the access port and lightly stroked her forehead. "You're doing so well, baby girl," I whispered, my voice rough with exhaustion. Every inhale was a battle for both of us. A soft knock drew my attention. Nurse Amanda, a kind-eyed woman with gentle confidence, slipped inside. Her badge read RN PICU in crisp letters. "How's she doing?" I asked, voice hushed. She checked the monitor and chart. "Stable, vent settings are holding. We're titrating her sedation so she can rest comfortably. The doctor will be in soon to discuss extubation criteria." I breathed out. "Sedation? Will she remember any of this?" Amanda offered a small smile. "Probably not. At this age, babies don't form lasting memories of ICU stays. But we're minimizing the dosage." I nodded, feeling the weight of gratitude and guilt. The sedation kept my daughter comfortable, but it also muted her small presence. Amanda glanced at the clock. "You need rest. You're doing an incredible job. There's a sleep room down the hall. TV, shower. I can cover for you." I hesitated, thumb brushing Evangeline's hand. "I can't leave her." She laid a reassuring hand on my arm. "You'll be stronger if you rest. She's in good hands." I squeezed back, then rose reluctantly. "Okay, just an hour." She nodded and headed out. I gathered my belongings, journal, phone, a half-eaten granola bar, and slipped into the dim hallway. The sleep room's door creaked as I entered, and the faint aroma of disinfectant lingered. I showered quickly, letting the warm water wash away the hospital's chill. For a moment, I closed my eyes, imagining I was home, elbow deep in dishes, soothing Evangeline with a lullaby. Then I toweled off, dressed in fresh scrubs, and fought the urge to flee back to her. Returning to the PICU, I found my mother already at Evangeline's side, her grandmother's instincts fully engaged. She read to her daughter from a worn paperback, the words soft and lulling. "I'm back," I whispered, stepping beside them. My mother looked up, smile gentle. "She seems comfortable. The doctor's on his way." We sat in silence as the door opened to reveal Dr. Patel, a pediatric intensivist whose calm demeanor was a beacon in these tumultuous days. He reviewed the charts, eyes scanning each line. "Her blood gases are improving," he announced. "She's tolerant of the current ventilator wean. If she continues this trend, we can begin extubation protocol tomorrow morning." My heart stuttered. Extubation meant freedom from the tube, the ability to breathe on her own, to cry, to taste air without mechanical assistance. But it also carried risk. "What are the criteria?" I asked. He met my gaze. "Spontaneous breathing trials, stable oxygenation on low levels of support, minimal secretions, and a strong cough reflex. We'll assess tonight." I exhaled, gratitude and fear mingling in my chest. "Thank you." Dr. Patel nodded and left, vanishing into the corridor like a silent guardian. My mother gently straightened Evangeline's swaddle. "She's going to be okay," she said softly. I leaned close, inhaling the faint scent of antiseptic and a hint of baby shampoo, a smell that had become woven into my soul. "I hope so. We get one chance." Night settled over the city, the PICU's lights dimming as other families drifted between hope and despair. I curled into the recliner, exhaustion pressing down. My mother took the seat beside me, her hand warm on mine. "Tell me about Breckenridge," I murmured, recalling the ski trip we'd planned before Evangeline's birth. She laughed softly. "We'll go next year. You and me and the baby will carve fresh snow." I smiled, tears threatening. "Promise?" She squeezed my hand. "Promise." I closed my eyes, letting that promise cradle me, until the gentle beep of the monitor pulled me back. The small room held its breath with me, poised on the brink of a new dawn. Dawn broke again, painting the PICU in pale pinks and grays, as sunlight filtered through the blinds. I sat in the recliner, cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, watching Evangeline's monitor. Its steady beeps sang of peace, for now. A soft knock and Nurse Amanda appeared, chart in hand. "Ready for the spontaneous breathing trial?" she asked gently. My stomach tightened. "If she's ready." Amanda smiled. "The team agreed this morning." She attached a T-piece to Evangeline's endotracheal tube, cutting off the ventilator's assist. For the first time in days, it was only her own lungs doing the work. I held my breath. Every inhale was measured, every exhale a victory. Amanda monitored the display, her brow furrowing slightly at a minor dip in oxygen. Then the numbers stabilized, green ticks of approval. An hour later, Dr. Patel returned. "She's tolerating it well. Let's move ahead with extubation after lunch." My heart pounded. Extubation. No tube. Air and cries and vulnerability. That afternoon they prepared the room. I stood by as they removed the ties, cleaned the tube site, and eased the tube free. Evangeline let out a weak cry, a sound so small it was almost a sigh. Then she breathed, clear and loud and miraculous. Tears blurred my vision. "She did it," I whispered. My mother leaned over to kiss Evangeline's forehead, our little warrior. The rest of the day passed in flurries of bottle attempts, this time without coughing, and gentle skin-to-skin cuddling. Evangeline's eyes opened, blinking in the bright light, and she fixed her gaze on mine. It felt like home. That night, as I tucked her into a crib without an endotracheal tube, I whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll feed in our living room." She cooed in response, a sound that felt like music. But as sleep claimed me, doubt crept in. Would tomorrow's feeding at home go as smoothly? The morning sun filtered softly into the PICU, ushering in the promise of progress. I cradled Evangeline against my chest, her tiny hand curling around my finger as I rocked in the vinyl recliner. Today was the day we would leave the hospital, if all went well. The discharge summary was printed and awaiting signatures. The home nurse roster was finalized. The oxygen tank was prepped in my car outside. Everything was ready for our homecoming. Yet the air in the PICU felt heavy with anticipation and fear. We had made it this far, through hypoxia, apneas, intubations, and feeding trials, and now the final hurdle loomed ahead, taking our fragile daughter into the world beyond these walls, where the safety net of alarms and experts would be replaced by ours. A flutter of nurses greeted me as I edged through the double doors. Nurse Amanda offered a bright smile. "She's eating 5 ounces now, consistently," she reported, "and her oxygen saturations are stable on room air for 2 hours. The doctors are ready for discharge orders." My mother and Jake were waiting by the door. My brother caught my eye and offered a small thumbs up. Relief and nerves intertwined in my chest. "Let's do this," I whispered to myself. We headed to the consultation room, where the neonatologist and pediatric cardiologist waited. Charts, prescriptions, and instruction packets lay spread on a table. The doctors reviewed vitals once more, confirming what we already knew. Evangeline was safe to go home. "Please be vigilant with feeding positions and pacing. Drive," Patel instructed, tapping a printed schedule. "Call the home nurse for any concerns." I nodded, absorbing every word like a lifeline. "Thank you for everything." My mother placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You've got this." We signed the final forms, and the settlement felt momentous. A battle won, a new chapter begun. As we exited through the unit doors, the scent of antiseptic gave way to the hospital's vibrant halls, and then to the crisp autumn air outside. The car ride home was surreal. I buckled Evangeline into her infant seat, this time with her own cries muffled by the car strap, her eyes wide and curious. The oxygen tank in the back hummed softly, a reminder of her needs. Our neighborhood came into view. The white picket fence, the hydrangeas in bloom, the welcome home banner still hanging faintly from yesterday. As I carried Evangeline across the threshold, the living room felt transformed by her presence. The couch, the rug, the mobile overhead, all seemed to welcome her arrival. My mother unpacked the feeding station. Bottles warmed, formula prepared, syringes and medications lined up like soldiers ready for duty. Jake assembled the home oxygen regulator, testing every connection. I settled into the rocker, cradling Evangeline against my chest. "Welcome home," I whispered. She blinked up at me and cooed, a single bright note that dissolved weeks of fear. The sun dipped low, and I watched as she latched onto the bottle, swallowing with confident grace. No coughs, no alarms, just the gentle rhythm of a baby feeding in her mother's arms. My mother sat beside me, tears shining. I've never been prouder. I smiled through tears. Me too. As dusk settled, I rocked Evangeline to sleep in her bassinet, then turned off the monitor's display, relying instead on my own senses for this first night. My heart fluttered with both dread and excitement. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked in the wind. Somewhere the furnace hummed softly. I thought of the NICU's bright lights and the beeps that had ruled our days. Now, in the quiet of home, I wondered if I could truly protect her without the hospital's safety net. My phone buzzed with a text from a friend. "How are my warriors?" I typed back, "At home, feels like a dream." At midnight, I rose to check on Evangeline. She slept peacefully, wrapped in her favorite blanket. No alarms, no monitors, just the soft rhythm of her breath. I lay beside her bassinet, hand pressed to my heart. Tomorrow, we would write the next chapter, of growth, of first smiles, of laughter beyond the infirmary walls. But for now, we rested, together, in this new world we had fought so hard to reach. Sunrise found me awake and alert before Evangeline stirred, her breath soft in the stillness of our home. I cradled her against my chest and rose to greet the day, a ritual born of necessity. Check oxygen level, adjust the cannula, prepare the morning feed. The world outside our front window shimmered with dew, but inside, every moment centered on her fragile excellence. The day shift home nurse arrived as the first golden rays pierced our living room. Nurse Harper was young but confident, her satchel laden with supplies, and her smile a beacon of reassurance. "Good morning," she greeted, approaching with gentle authority. "How did the night go?" I exhaled. "Quiet, no episodes." "Excellent," she said, scanning the monitor and logs. "Let's do vitals, and our weekly weight check." She unwrapped Evangeline from the blanket and placed her on the infant scale. The numbers blinked. 2 pounds, 8 ounces. A modest gain, but a gain nonetheless. I sighed a breath of both relief and worry. Every ounce mattered. Harper wrapped her in a fresh blanket and checked her heart and lungs. "All sounds normal. Feeding schedule good?" "Every 3 hours," I confirmed. 5 ounces each time." "Perfect. We'll maintain this schedule for another week, then reassess." With instructions added to the chart, Nurse Harper gathered her things. We accompanied her to the door. My mother hovered in the hallway, offering quiet support. Once she left, I sank into the couch, exhaustion pressing against my bones. "I didn't know how lonely it could be at home," I murmured. The support at the hospital was constant. "Here, it's just me." My mother perched on the armrest. "But you're not alone. You have me and Jake, and we can build a network." I nodded, but doubt lingered. The days stretched ahead, each feed, each standby, each hazard waiting in the wings. By afternoon, I decided to venture outside. Fresh air seemed as necessary as oxygen itself. I dressed Evangeline in a soft onesie and tucked her into the stroller. We rolled down the sidewalk, the world vibrant with summer's heat. Birds chirped, neighbors tended their lawns, and children's laughter drifted from a nearby playground. I watched Evangeline's eyes track the clouds, her curiosity bright even in her tiny frame. I swallowed a lump of bittersweet joy. For this moment, we had fought so hard to reach. On the way back, my phone buzzed with texts. Videos of friends' kids running barefoot through sprinklers, invitations to playdates. I typed a response, maybe next month, my heart heavy with both longing and gratitude. That evening, my mother rang the dinner bell, metaphorical but a signal of life's small joys. Homemade soup simmered on the stove, its aroma mingling with baby lotion. Jake joined us for chicken salad, perpetual guard for middle-of-the-night feed. We ate in companionable silence, each flavor a reminder of normalcy reclaimed. After dinner, we gathered in the living room to watch the sunset. Evangeline dozed in my arms, eyelids fluttering with the promise of dreams. I thought of the day we first brought her home, the fear that had clung to me like a shadow. Now each quiet breath, each gentle sigh, felt like a victory. But tomorrow, the pediatric cardiologist's nurse would arrive for an echo appointment, our first test outside the hospital's walls. I knew the uncertainty of that evaluation could stir the anxious echo in my chest. Loss and fear had driven me to this fiercely protective love. And though the hospital's walls no longer enclosed us, the rhythm of vigilance had become the heartbeat of our home. I kissed Evangeline's forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, my brave girl. Tomorrow, we see what comes next." As I laid her in her crib, I realized that this was more than survival. It was a journey toward hope. Morning arrived ahead of me, sunlight spilling across the pastel walls of Evangeline's nursery, like a blessing and a challenge all at once. I carried her to the window seat, one arm cradled under her head, the other supporting her tiny back. Through the glass, I saw my neighbor's golden retriever bounding across its yard, carefree and oblivious to the battles waging within these walls. I felt the same yearning for freedom and normalcy, but knew that today's test would push us further away from that light. Today was the day of her echocardiogram, an ultrasound of her heart to check for lingering pulmonary hypertension, the specter that had haunted her from birth. The pediatric cardiology clinic was half an hour's drive, and I packed our diaper bag with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Extra bottles, warming pads, her favorite swaddle blanket patterned with moons and stars, the portable oxygen tank secured in its shoulder harness, and my mother's prayer shawl folded neatly on top. I locked eyes with Evangeline, pressing a kiss to her soft cheek. "My brave girl," I whispered. She blinked up at me, her wide eyes curious. I dashed a quick tear away. "Let's go show that heart who's boss." The drive was mostly silent. My mother drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Jake trailed us in his truck, radio off, rear view mirror tinted with worry. Occasionally, I caught my own reflection in the rear window, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but burning with resolve. We arrived at the clinic, a modern glass structure slicing the sky. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Families clustered in chairs, some with school-aged children, others with newborns like mine. I checked in at the desk, then guided Evangeline into a small exam room, its walls painted in soothing pastels, framed artwork of cartoon animals dancing in meadows. A nurse took her vitals, weight, temperature, oxygen saturation while sitting quietly in her lap. 2 pounds 9 ounces, she murmured with a professional nod. SATs at 95% on her nasal cannula. Good. I let out a breath I'd forgotten I'd been holding. The cardiologist would be with us soon, and then the real test would begin. After a brief wait, the door opened to reveal Dr. Martinez, her kindly face framed by wavy dark hair and glasses perched on her nose. She greeted us with warmth and examined Evangeline's chart before smiling. "Ready for your first echo, sweetheart?" I swaddled Evangeline in silence and laid her on the padded table beneath the high-resolution ultrasound machine. The tech applied cool gel to her chest, and the transducer moved methodically in smooth arcs across her skin. I hovered close, offering whispered encouragement. The panoramic screen above us lit up with black and white images, a 4-chamber view of her tiny heart, valves opening and closing in rhythmic precision. I held my breath. Dr. Martinez peered at the screen, her face thoughtful. For 20 long minutes, she measured ventricular dimensions, assessed flow rates, and calculated pressure gradients. Every drop of sweat on my brow felt like a beat lost in the rhythm of her heart. Then she straightened up and turned to me. "Overall, her heart function is good, and the pulmonary pressures have decreased significantly since her last reading. However, Her pause made my pulse skip. I do see a small residual shunt at the septal region and a slightly dilated right ventricle. Nothing we haven't managed, but it means she'll need periodic follow-up echoes every 3 months instead of 6. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Is it serious? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She shook her head gently. It's manageable. The body can often close small shunts on its own as it grows. We'll adjust her medications and monitor her closely, but no more unscheduled aerial travel and avoid high altitudes for now. I exhaled. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I appreciate your thoroughness. She offered a reassuring smile. You're doing great, Mama. We walked out of the clinic into a golden afternoon. The world felt both vast and constricted. Vibrant colors and open skies, laced with the knowledge that we must tread carefully. I buckled Evangeline into her seat and took a moment before climbing in. My mother turned to me, concern and pride mixing on her face. You handled that so well, she said softly. I managed a weak smile. It's just more adjustments. We drove home in silence, the afternoon sun inching toward dusk. At home, I carried Evangeline upstairs to the nursery, her small form swaying against my chest. I laid her in her crib, arranging her blankets and checking the oxygen tubing. Everything needed to be perfect. As I leaned over to kiss her goodnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Got the playpen set up in the living room. Thought you might like to try some tummy time soon. My heart warmed. You're the best, I typed back, pressing send. Turning off the light, I watched as shadows danced across the walls. Despite the day's successes, the echo results reminded me our journey was far from over. And while I felt a surge of hope, her heart was healing. I sensed another challenge looming, one I hadn't yet anticipated. The weekend arrived in a blur of routines. Feedings every 3 hours, medication checks, oxygen tank refills, and tentative embraces outside in the courtyard for fresh air. Each day felt identical yet monumental, a mosaic of small victories and quiet anxieties. I balanced breastfeeding attempts with bottle feeding and supplemental oxygen, logging every minute for our next cardiology follow-up. It was late Sunday afternoon when I first noticed the rash. I was changing Evangeline's diaper on her changing table, lifting her little legs to wipe away the last traces of cream, when I saw it. Tiny red splotches fanning out across her hips and thighs. I froze, breath catching. I called my mother, who rushed into the nursery. She knelt beside me, gentle hands parting the swaddle to reveal the rash in full. The redness spread in an intricate lace, delicate yet alarming. Oh, honey, she whispered, voice breaking. This isn't good. Fear surged through me. I reached for my phone and Googled, baby rash causes oxygen allergy? The screen filled with possibilities. Contact dermatitis, diaper rash, allergic reaction, infection. My heart hammered. Evangeline's skin had always been sensitive, but never like this. We need help, I said, urgency sharp in my voice. Call the on-call pediatrician. My mother dialed as I gently lifted Evangeline, covering the rash with soft fabric. The phone line crackled, and the doctor's sleepy voice answered. Doctor, my daughter has a rash, bright red, spreading across her thighs and hips. She's on oxygen, but I don't think it's just pressure. It looks allergic or infectious. He asked a series of questions. When it started, any new soaps or fabrics, her feeding patterns. I rattled off answers, my mind racing. Bring her to the clinic first thing in the morning, he instructed. If it worsens tonight, head to urgent care. I exhaled, relief mingling with dread. The rash hadn't yet blistered or caused fever, but the unknown loomed. That night, I slept in the nursery on the floor beside Evangeline's crib. I pressed cool rationality against the heat of my fear. At 2 a.m., she stirred, her breaths shallow and rapid. I scooped her into my arms, skin against skin, smoothing her rash with gentle strokes. She cooed softly, unaware of the chaos her body brewed. Morning light found us in the car, headed to the pediatric clinic. My mother drove, the crisp spring air filtering through the window. Inside, the nurse weighed Evangeline and noted the rash, then led us to an exam room. I undressed her, exposing the angry spread of red across her skin. The doctor re-entered, his face grave as he examined her chart, and then the rash. This appears to be a reaction to something, possibly a topical allergen or an antibiotic in her formula. We'll run a CBC and a skin culture, he said, ordering several vials of blood and a swab of the rash. We'll start her on a mild steroid cream to reduce inflammation. My chest tightened, blood draws on my fragile baby. I placed a finger on her wrist, counting her pulse as the phlebotomist drew vials of red liquid. The doctor watched sympathetically. I know this is hard. I nodded. I need her better. He smiled. We all do. The tests will help us pinpoint the cause. We waited, the ticking clock amplifying our anxiety. I held Evangeline, the rash now layered with the sheen of steroid ointment. 2 hours later, the results arrived. White cell count slightly elevated, no bacterial growth on the culture. The pediatrician concluded it was likely allergic contact dermatitis, perhaps a reaction to the adhesive on her monitors or one of the fabric swaddles. Eliminate any non-cotton fabrics and watch. We'll reevaluate in 2 days, he said, handing back the chart. Avoid the rash area for oxygen cannula straps, pad them with hypoallergenic gauze. Relief and frustration warred inside me. I promised to follow every instruction. Driving back, I called Jake. Can you swap out her bedding for 100% cotton? He replied instantly. On it. I'll deliver new swaddles tonight. When we arrived home, my mother and brother had reassembled the nursery. Fresh cotton sheets, soft muslin swaddles, gauze padding at pressure points. They erased every suspect fabric. Exhaustion weighed on me as I fed Evangeline her bottle. I marveled at her resilience, how a body so small could endure so much. That night, I nestled against her crib, brushing her hair and silently praying her skin would heal. As sleep claimed me, I dreamt of a future where her skin was unblemished, where the only marks on her body would be the laughter lines of joy. But for now, we waited on a diagnosis, and I knew that every rash, every setback would test the limits of my hope and my strength. The dawn of Part 16 broke not with gentle light, but with the soft whimper of Evangeline's skin flaring beneath fresh cotton wraps. I had dared to hope last night's steroid cream would calm the rash, but instead, waking found it angrier, thicker, warmer, laced with tiny welts that crawled across her hip. I rushed to her side, heart lodged in my throat. Her breaths came in low murmurs, as though the might of pain had made each intake a burden. My mother stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. The rash! It's worse, I whispered, my voice brittle. She reached across and pressed a cool cloth to Evangeline's cheek. Let's not panic, we'll call the pediatrician again. I nodded, though panic gnawed at every fiber. I dialed the on-call line, voice shaking as I described the rash's rapid resurgence, the new swelling around her joints, the faint fever dancing on her forehead. Bring her in now, the doctor's tone was decisive. We need to rule out viral infection or early eczema complicated by her delicate condition. Within the hour, we were back at the pediatric clinic's sliding doors, greeted by the same nurse who had weighed Evangeline days before. She ushered us through with quick efficiency. This time, the doctor conducted a thorough exam, gentle pressure on each rash patch, checking for tenderness or heat. He palpated her lymph nodes and auscultated lung fields, each finding whispered a possible diagnosis. I'm ordering a panel, viral PCR, serum IgE levels, and an immunology consult, he said, swiveling to update his chart. We'll admit her for observation and start a mild oral antihistamine to curb the allergic response. My breath caught. Admission meant more walls, more monitors, more distance from home. But I barely hesitated. They escorted us to a private pediatric room lined with pastel murals. A new nurse introduced herself as Claire and began drawing blood and setting up IV access for fluids and medications. Every prick of the needle etched guilt into my heart. I was asking this tiny warrior to endure more. Claire offered a reassuring smile as she secured the line. She's a trooper, she murmured. I hugged Evangeline close, feeling the rash's harsh texture through her cotton onesie. I whispered promises. We'd solve this. We'd beat this. She stared back at me with large, trusting eyes. As the evening shifted into night, the anti-VRAI and allergy workup began. Machines hummed, lights blinked, My mother slept in a recliner. I remained upright on the edge of the bed, torch of resolve in my chest. In the dim glow of the monitor, I watched her chest rise and fall, counting beats, breaths, prayers. At 2 a.m., her temperature spiked. Her small brow glistened with fever. I pressed the call button, and Claire arrived immediately. Her steps hushed. "Let's get her cooled down," Claire said, adjusting the room's thermostat and placing a cool pack under Evangeline's neck. The fever broke within minutes, and I exhaled with a mix of relief and renewed dread. By morning, the lab work returned, viral PCR negative, IgE elevated, confirming hypersensitivity. The immunologist recommended we rotate antihistamines and trial a mild topical immunomodulator under close supervision. They cautioned that her immature immune system might react unpredictably. I sat beside her crib, exhaustion seeping into my bones. "One more hurdle," I whispered. "Then we become free." She stirred, her rash settling slightly beneath the new regimen. Her small mouth opened in a faint coo, and I traced a kiss along her forehead. A knock came at the door. Our pediatric cardiologist, Dr. Martinez, reappearing like a guardian angel. "I heard about the rash flare," she said, concern knitting her brow. "How is our brave girl?" I met her gaze. "Fighting." She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We'll get this under control. Then, you and Mom can bring her home again." The promise of freedom flickered in my chest. But even as hope warmed me, I felt the thrum of uncertainty beneath it. Because in this world of fragile victories, there was always another challenge ready to break the silence. The dawn after the rash outbreak was thick with silence. Evangeline lay in her hospital crib, the faint glow of monitors painting her skin in pale neon. Her rash had receded to a dull pink, the antihistamine and immunomodulator working their quiet magic. Yet as I watched her chest rise, my heart trembled at the thought that another storm could surge at any moment. Sleep had eluded me. I dozed in the recliner, waking each time she moved. Finally I rose, cup of lukewarm tea in hand, and slipped into a chair by the window. Outside, the sky was a canvas of bruised purple and rose, as though reflecting the fragility of this battle-worn journey. My mother appeared, carrying a fresh blanket. She slid it over my shoulders wordlessly, her presence a balm. Jake, drawn by worry, hovered outside the room, phone in hand in case I needed him. At 8 a.m., Dr. Patel arrived for rounds. He reviewed the rash's progress and the lab results. "We'll continue this regimen and reassess in 2 days. If no new flares, we can consider discharge early next week." Hope flickered inside me, but cautious. I nodded, gratitude and fear intertwining. Later that morning, a speech therapist arrived, an unexpected visitor in the NICU turned PICU. She introduced herself as Maria and explained she'd be working on Evangeline's oral motor skills, crucial for feeding and preventing aspiration. I watched as she guided Evangeline through gentle reflex exercises, placing a soft brush on her cheek to stimulate rooting, offering a spoon to practice small tastes of thickened nipple milk. Each exercise was a seed planted in anticipation of full independent feeding. When Maria left, I carried Evangeline to the mobile where colorful shapes spun overhead. Her eyes followed the spinning moon, her tiny hand reaching out. The first time I saw her react to stimulation, hope swelled in my chest. By afternoon, the rash was nearly gone. I sat beside her crib, running my hand through her hair. "We're almost there, baby," I whispered. But as afternoon light waned, a new concern emerged. Evangeline began to fuss at the IV site in her arm, redness creeping from the catheter insertion. Alarm jolted through me. I pressed the call button, and Claire appeared at my side. "She's irritated here," I said, pointing to the inflamed skin. Claire peered at the site. "Looks like early phlebitis. We'll need to relocate the IV and apply a warm compress to reduce the inflammation." My heart sank at the thought of another needle, but I nodded. Moments later, a pediatric nurse slid back the sleeve and cleansed the area, then inserted a new line in her other arm. I held her hand, murmuring apologies. The warmth of the compress soothed her as we settled back into vigil. My mother wiped away a tear. "She's stronger than I ever imagined." I leaned against her, exhaustion and pride pooling together. She has to be. That evening, Dr. Martinez stopped by to check the rash and congratulate us on therapy progress. She squatted beside me and brushed Evangeline's cheek. "She's doing beautifully," she said softly. "If she maintains this, we'll plan for discharge by week's end." I nodded, tears stinging. "Thank you." When night fell, I packed a small bag for home, a change of clothes for me, extra baby outfits, fresh ointments. The weight of anticipation settled in my bones. As I laid beside Evangeline on the recliner once more, I whispered, "Tomorrow we go home." She stirred, a soft coo in her sleep, and the monitor beeped, a lullaby that sang of both trials behind and the promise of new beginnings. But in the back of my mind, I knew that freedom was never certain. It was something earned, lost, and reclaimed with every breath. And our final test before home would demand everything we had learned. Morning light filtered through the hospital curtains, gilding the room in pale gold, as though urging us toward the day's promise. Today was the day of the discharge readiness trial, a full 24-hour period without the IV line, relying solely on oral feeds and home oxygen settings to prove we could manage at home. I woke before the nurse arrived, sitting up on the recliner, Evangeline cradled in my arms. Her skin gleamed with health, no rash, no inflammation. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me. "Good morning, my miracle," I whispered, brushing her hair. "Ready to show them you're ready?" I wiped away a tear. The path had been arduous, full of alarms and interventions, but knots of fear unraveled in the face of this moment. At 8 a.m., Dr. Patel arrived with charts and a clipboard. His expression was both encouraging and clinical. "The plan is simple. We'll discontinue IV fluids, remove the line, and monitor intake and output. We'll leave her oxygen on home settings. If she tolerates for 24 hours, we'll finalize discharge tonight." I nodded, absorbing every word. "I understand." He smiled. "You've done brilliantly." As soon as he left, the nurse prepared to remove the IV catheter. I held Evangeline's hand. Her tiny fingers curled around my thumb as they gently pulled the line free. A rush of relief washed over me. "All done," the nurse said, applying a sterile dressing. "Now feed and watch." I carried my daughter to her feeding chair, positioning her upright. Mother and child, alone in a room where independence would be measured. I offered the bottle. Evangeline lapped at the milk with eagerness that warmed my soul. 5 ounces, 10, 15. Her stomach welcomed each drop without hesitation. I logged the intake meticulously. 50 milliliters, 100 milliliters, 150 milliliters, until the bottle was empty. "Excellent," I whispered, brushing her cheek. "You did it." That afternoon, the home oxygen technician arrived to verify the equipment. He sat with a clipboard, observing the flow rate set to 3 liters per minute via nasal cannula and checking the tubing for kinks. "Everything's good," he confirmed. "This system will support her breathing as you have at home." I felt a pang of gratitude. They'd done this before, but now I was alone with her outside these walls. The next feeding passed uneventfully, and we settled into a rhythm. Feed, nap, monitor, repeat. It felt familiar yet extraordinary, as though the final tether to the hospital's safety was slowly being severed. By evening, nurses conducted periodic vitals. Her oxygen saturation remained above 93%, heart rate stable, temperature normal. Each check was a knot loosening in my chest. Dinner came in the form of my third feeding station adjustment, Mom's homemade chicken broth. I positioned Evangeline upright and offered it cautiously. She sipped, provoking a smile from me that felt like the sun's first rays breaking through clouds. Night descended. The room lights dimmed. Nurses observed from the hallway, and I prepared for the longest vigil, sleeping without the IV. I settled into the recliner, blanket on my lap, Evangeline in her bassinet beside me, oxygen tubing connecting her to the tank in the corner. Hours passed. At midnight, I rose to adjust her cannula. No alarms sounded. At 2 a.m., I checked her temperature, steady. At 4, the oxygen gauge showed ample supply. Each sign felt like a triumph. At 5:30 a.m., I woke to the soft rhythmic hum of her breathing, unguided by ventilators or lines, purely her own lungs moving the air. I exhaled a prayer of thanks. Nurse Amanda peeked in at dawn's first light. "It looks like she's ready," she said softly, eyes moist. "All criteria met." I felt the air around me pulse with anticipation. Dr. Patel arrived, reviewing charts one last time. He smiled as though sharing a private victory. "Congratulations," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome home." Tears blurred my vision. "Thank you. Thank you so much." My mother appeared, her face radiant. She enveloped me in a hug so fierce it felt like reclaiming the world. By mid-morning, we packed our bags. This time not for trial, but for our real return home. Evangeline, swaddled in her moon and star blanket, rested against my chest as I navigated the wheelchair down the hospital's bright halls. Nurses lined the hallways, offering applause and tears of their own. We passed through the automatic doors into sunlight that felt warmer than I remembered. The car awaited, the oxygen tank loaded, the nursery at home humming with expectation. My mother helped guide Evangeline into her car seat. She clutched my hand as I climbed into the driver's seat. "Home," I whispered, engine rumbling to life. The world stretched out before me, wide, uncertain, and ours to shape. We drove into the late morning glow, heartbeats in time with each mile toward our newfound freedom. The path would still hold challenges, but today we had proven one truth. She was strong enough, and I was strong enough, to face whatever came next. Tomorrow, 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The morning sun rose over our quiet street, illuminating the system of tubes and monitors that filled our living room as if to herald a new day of possibilities. Evangeline lay nestled in her bouncer, eyes fluttering open to take in the soft pastel ceiling we'd painted for her. Without the hum of hospital equipment, even our home felt transformed into a sanctuary of healing. As I prepared her morning bottle, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 7 weeks ago, my daughter's first breaths came in a hospital room. Today, they came here, surrounded by love, laughter, and the faint scent of lavender from a candle lit for calm. But the real test wasn't over. She was due for her first routine home check, a visit from the community health nurse and her developmental therapist. By mid-morning, Nurse Harper arrived with her satchel, clipboard in hand. Her presence was a comforting echo of the hospital's safety net. "How is my favorite patient?" she asked, kneeling beside me. I smiled, handing her the chart I kept meticulously updated. 5 ounces every 3 hours, oxygen at 2 liters, rash gone for days, tantrums only when she wants extra milk. Harper laughed softly and examined Evangeline's vitals, weight up to 2 pounds, 12 ounces, saturation stable, no new skin issues. All looks excellent. Next home visit in 2 weeks. She packed up and headed out, leaving me to celebrate with a grateful sigh. But within minutes, the developmental therapist, Maria, called to schedule a first milestone assessment. I guided Evangeline to her playmat where colorful blocks and textures awaited her exploration. Maria arrived carrying an array of sensory toys. "Today, we look at her motor skills and social engagement," she explained. "Don't worry, this is fun for both of you." I watched as she encouraged Evangeline to reach for a soft rattle suspended above her. Her tiny hand shot out and gripped the toy, eyes lighting with curiosity. A wave of pride washed over me. Every small movement was a victory arc in her story. But as the afternoon sun dipped low, I felt a familiar flutter. A cough, soft yet insistent. My heart clenched. I scooped Evangeline into my arms, checking her oxygen cannula. Saturations dipped briefly but steadied. Still, the cough persisted, wet and rattling. My mind raced back to the hospital ER's fluorescent lights, the paramedics' urgency. I dialed my mother, voice tight. "She's coughing again. Wet sound." Mom arrived within minutes, her presence an anchor. We watched as the coughs tapered into a few shuddered breaths. Better, but unsettling. "Maybe it's just a cold?" I ventured. "The weather's changed." Mom shook her head. "Let's call Dr. Patel." He picked up on the first ring. On his advice, we increased humidification on her cannula, offered small sips of water, and monitored closely. Hours passed. The cough eased but left a trace of mucus in her throat that made my chest ache. That night, as I lay beside her in the rocker, I couldn't shake the unease. Tomorrow, our pediatric cardiology follow-up was scheduled, and I worried. Would the residual secretions affect her heart now that pulmonary pressures had mostly normalized? I stroked her hair gently and whispered, "My brave girl, you've conquered so much. We're almost at the end of this battle, I promise." She cooed in response, a fragile lullaby. But as dawn approached, I sensed that our story still held one final chapter, one that would test everything we'd learned about resilience, love, and the true meaning of home. The morning light crept softly through our living room window, illuminating the peaceful rhythm of Evangeline's breathing as she slept wrapped in her moon and star swaddle. Today was the day of her final scheduled pediatric cardiology check, a chance to confirm that her heart had truly recovered and that home at last would no longer be shadowed by medical uncertainty. My mother and Jake flanked me as we drove to Dr. Martinez's office, the car's warm hum a lullaby of normalcy. Evangeline lay in her car seat in the back, her chest rising steadily. I stole glances at her tiny profile, my heart filled with gratitude for the journey we'd endured. The clinic's waiting room felt bright and airy, a far contrast to the sterile NICU corridors of weeks ago. We settled into comfortable chairs, chatting quietly as the receptionist called our name. Dr. Martinez greeted us in the echoing hallway, her expression kind but professional. "Ready to see how our little warrior is doing?" she asked, motioning us into the echo lab. Inside, the same ultrasound machine glowed like a familiar friend. I laid Evangeline on the exam table, her small fingers curling around mine. The tech applied gel, and the transducer began its gentle journey across her chest. On the screen, I watched the 4-chamber view, her heart valves opening and closing with confident precision, ventricular walls moving in perfect synchronicity. For the first time, the numbers flashed in green without qualifiers. No residual shunt, normal right ventricular size, pulmonary pressures well within safe limits. I reached out to touch the screen, tears welling. "It's perfect," Dr. Martinez declared, voice soft with joy. She turned to me. "She's ready to thrive without restrictions." Relief cascaded through me, dissolving weeks of anxiety into pure emotion. I squeezed Evangeline's hand and whispered, "Home, baby. We're finally home." As we left the clinic, the world felt transformed, every color more vivid, every sound more precious. We returned to our house, where my mother had prepared a welcoming spread. Tea, sandwiches, and a small vanilla cake decorated with fondant stars. Inside, I placed Evangeline in her high chair for a special celebration, her first taste of pureed banana, a milestone untainted by tubes or monitors. She wrapped her small fist around the spoon I offered, gumming at the food with wide-eyed delight. Laughter rippled through the room as Jake snapped photos and my mother wiped tears from her eyes. The house was filled with warmth, the soft hum of everyday appliances, the chatter of family gathered, the scent of home-cooked meals. That evening, I bathed Evangeline in warm water scented with lavender, her giggles floating like bubbles in the air. I wrapped her in a knitted towel and carried her to the nursery I had so meticulously prepared, the mobile spinning its stars and moons above her crib. I tucked her in, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "You did it, my love," I whispered. "You proved them all wrong. You're not a burden, you're our blessing." She yawned, blinking sleepily in the soft glow of her nightlight. I lay beside her crib, exhaustion settling into my bones. The oven's low hum drifted from the kitchen, the quiet heartbeat of our home's routines. Outside, the wind rustled the branches of the hydrangeas. I closed my eyes, contentment folding around me like a blanket. Our story had been one of trials and triumphs, of love fierce enough to conquer every fear. Now, peace reigned in the space between her breaths. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them! Subscribe and turn on notifications.